Just make sure it's on. Yep. All right, this will be the lecture video for week 2, January 16th. And today we're going to talk about the legal and constitutional foundations of business. So basically, sources of law. A lot of this might be somewhat of a review for you from civics class in high school, but if that's the case, that's all right. Never hurts to have a little review. I want to make some general points before we get into specific stuff. Law, as we talk about it, this all-encompassing word of law, consists of enforceable rules that govern relationships between individuals and between individuals and society. So when I say between individuals, if Annabeth is leaving class and I run over her, she can sue me for that. There are laws that will govern the relationship between individuals. If I did it on purpose and I was trying to hurt her, then that implicates issues between me and society. I might be charged with a crime for that. So law encompasses these duties between individuals and then between individuals and society. That's just one huge overarching principle. There's a tension, obviously, in the law between needing to have order, predictability, especially in the business world. We want to know if we're making a product that it's legal. We want to know if somebody's going to sue us that that there are procedures for that. It's going to be done fairly. In order for us to operate successfully in business, we need that predictability. There's also a tension between predictability, stability, and the need for change. So that's one of the things we're going to look at in this chapter. The law today is not the same as the law in 1776 or whenever our country was founded and the Constitution was written. It has evolved over time because it's needed to. So while we do say that we favor the law to be static and predictable, it does need to be able to change. So those are kind of two competing interests that you'll see throughout the whole semester, really. Keep in mind, too, that the Constitution, when we say that's the supreme law of the land, and I mean the U.S. Constitution, that means that no law of any state or any city or any county can conflict with the Constitution. No law that Congress passes can conflict with the Constitution. Nothing can. If it violates the Constitution, it is illegal. Keep in mind, too, that, and this is remedial for you from your civics, but remember we have a federal system of government, right? So when the states came together to form the United States of America, they gave, through the Constitution, certain powers to the federal government. And what they specifically gave the federal government, then the federal government can do. But if they didn't specifically give it to the federal government, it was reserved to the states. That can seem, in this day and age, kind of backwards. I mean, it feels like a lot of times that the heavier government entity is the federal government, the one that's more in our business, that's more burdensome, that's really kind of taken over as the main regulator. But that's not the way that the founders intended it. The states were supposed to did retain most powers to govern themselves, and then they delegated some specific things to the federal government in the Constitution. We'll talk about a few of those that affect business a little bit later. I think I told you this last week, but I want to reiterate this again. We're not here to learn exactly what the law is. That would take, well, for one thing, if we were studying criminal law, if you were taking that class in law school, that'd be an entire semester. We obviously can't do that. We're going to do criminal law here in a week. We'll do tort law in a week. Laws also change from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. The criminal laws in the state of Georgia are going to be different than the criminal laws in Alabama, different than the ones in South Carolina, different than the ones in Alaska. There'll be a lot of similarities, but they're not all the same. Got students watching online who aren't in Georgia. So this is not a Georgia-specific class when it comes to the law. And even if it was, our job is not to memorize the law. I will tell you that every attorney I know is constantly going back to look and read what the law is. I've been practicing adoption law for 15 years. I still go back and look at it when I'm about to do something. I know it, I remember, but I go back and look just to make sure. Or there'll be something that'll come up that I haven't done before. Or facts of the case will be so peculiarly arranged that I haven't seen that before. And I need to go back and look at how this law interacts with this law. We're constantly getting new situations. The other reason it would be unwise for me to try to teach y'all the law is that the law changes, as I mentioned a minute ago. We could spend all semester memorizing some aspects of contract law only for the legislature to pass a new law in March that changed whatever it is we memorized. Law changes all the time. So you might be thinking, well, if we're not here to learn law, then what are we here for? We're going to learn about the law generally. I want you to be able to recognize when you come across a situation, oh, this is contract law. I remember that we talked about these things in contract law, or I might have some liability for doing whatever action I'm going to take. What is my duty to people who come in my store? What is my duty to my employees? Those are all legal questions, but there's nobody out there in business who's got all of the law memorized. That just doesn't happen. What I need for you to be able to do is be like, this is an employment law question. It has to do with the Americans with Disabilities Act. I need to get further information on this. I need to consult my lawyer. Now, there are going to be some laws that you know, okay? There'll be some laws that you know. You can't, that you can't decline to hire somebody because they're Muslim. We all know that. We probably couldn't cite the exact chapter and verse of what law says that, but we know that. So there's a lot of it that you'll find that you already know the general principle of. You might just not know the exact chapter and verse of it. So I want you to be able to spot those things, and then I want you to be able to look at issues from multiple sides. And you'll see when we get into looking at how some of these cases turn out that there are really good arguments on both sides. And I want you to be able to think like that too. So that's my general sort of introduction for this chapter. So let's look at specific sources of law in our country. There's going to be 4 of them. All right, constitutional law, it's all in your outline. Constitutional law, statutory law, case law, and administrative law. We're going to go through those one by one. So constitutional law. We all are familiar with the U.S. Constitution. Supreme law of the land. Distributes power among the branches of government, sets up our court system, sets up the federal system of government that we have. As I mentioned, any law that conflicts with the Constitution is invalid, illegal, unconstitutional. Some examples of constitutional law would be the First Amendment. This will be familiar to you. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or of the right of the people to peaceably assemble. We all recognize that language from the First Amendment, and we know that as our familiar right to freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to assemble. That's an example of constitutional law. That came from the text of the Constitution. Another example of constitutional law would be from Article 1, Section 8, which gives Congress the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations, among the states, and with Indian tribes. We know that as the Commerce Clause. That is the specific delegation of power that the states gave the federal government to regulate commerce between the states, interstate commerce, business between the states. We've given the federal government power to do that. And boy, have they taken it, right? They regulate everything that has to do with trade. Back when the founders gave them that right, interstate commerce was, I'm not going to say non-existent. We had interstate commerce, but you didn't have people on their laptops ordering off Amazon from another state. We didn't have that. Back then, if you were ordering something, you were writing it down and mailing it via Pony Express, right? Interstate commerce was a much smaller slice of the overall commerce pie than it is today. Today, it's very hard to find any business that is limited to just in-state, right? It's difficult to even comprehend. So most of the regulation of business has been done at the federal level because of the Commerce Clause. The reason I bring that up is it's another example of constitutional law. Each state has their own constitution as well. So their own state constitutions are going to govern whatever state laws each state passes, and no state law can violate the state constitution, just like no federal law can violate the federal constitution. Constitutional law. So two sources really. There'll be a state constitution, whatever state you're operating in, and there's always the U.S. Constitution. All right, statutory law. You've heard of a statute probably, and you might recognize that as some form of law. Who makes statutes? Where does that come from? Where does statutory law come from as well? Yes. The question is, could you define a statute different from law? So we're doing a Venn diagram. We got law, and then we have statutes are within the law. Not every law is a statute, but every statute is a law. Then the difference is that a statute is a law that is passed by a legislative body. So at the federal level then, Travis, who passes statutes at the federal level? What's our legislature called at the federal level? No, that's on the judicials. This is in the legislative branch. The House of Representatives and the Senate, what do we call them? Congress, right? When I say Congress, I mean the U.S. House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. Any laws that they pass are statutes. So at the Georgia level, who would pass statutes in Georgia? Khalil, who would pass statutes in Georgia? The Georgia State Legislature, right? We have a House of Representatives and a Senate in Georgia as well. Any laws that they pass are Georgia statutes, state statutes. Any laws that Congress passes are federal statutes. Statutes are grouped together in books. We don't really use books much anymore because everything is online. But I'm old enough to remember when we didn't have anything online, and every law that we went to look up, we went and got the book where it was. So statutes, are grouped by topic. So you'll have, let's say that we were in a law library, and this entire wall was the United States Code. That's the collection of statutes passed by Congress. It's printed every year because every year they're going to be passing new laws or changing old laws or tweaking them somehow. So if I wanted to find if I wanted to look up some federal crimes, I would go and I would pull the volume of the U.S. Code that deals with crimes, and I'd find my law in there. Same thing for every state. So if we had the Georgia Code, that's the collection of Georgia statutes, and it would be on the wall, I'd go and I would pull the volume of whatever book for subject matter I was looking for that law. So statutes are passed by legislatures, and they are published together in what we call a code. I have some examples of statutes for you in your outline. So if you'll look on top of page 2, you'll see the Georgia statute for battery. And you don't need to know this for testing purposes, but just so you'll know what I'm giving you. When you see section 16.523-1, 23.1, if you wanted to find the battery statute, you would go to volume 16 of the Georgia Code. That'd be our tort law section or our criminal law section, depending on which one it was. But that's what that site is. So that would direct me to where I could find the law in the Georgia Code. It says, see Georgia statute section 16-5-23.1 battery below. What? Do y'all have on page 1 some introductory points? Hold on. Let me see what y'all are looking at. That's not the right one. That means I posted the wrong one.
You also have to go all the way down to the bottom of page 3 to get to case law.
Okay. So for some reason, I posted the wrong one. So let me take a second and post the correct one. Glad you brought that up, Annabelle. I think I told y'all last week that I would have some technological difficulties, didn't I? I didn't expect it to be this soon or this bad. If you're watching online, just hang loose. I'll have this fixed for y'all before you watch this lecture. All right. CSU. Oh, that's so frustrating. All right, here's the right one. Yes, sir. So the question is, if the laws change and evolve over time, what about the Constitution? Two things I say about that. One is that the Constitution could change over time if the states were to amend it. And we have had several amendments. We haven't had any in a really long time. Yeah, the last amendment, that's a good question. Somebody look that up. It's been a while. And then second, even though the text of the Constitution doesn't change, the way that the courts interpret what the Constitution says can change. And we are going to talk about that when we get to case law. Annabeth.
It was the 27th Amendment, and it is no law verifying the compensation for the services of the senators and representatives shall take effect of representatives.
Okay. I don't even know what that means.
It was ratified in 1992.
Something about Congress's paycheck, so that's what that is. All right, let me.
Apparently inspired by a college term paper.
Interesting.
His professor gave him a C in that assignment.
How about that? Okay, this thing is telling me the connection is not private. Do y'all ever get that? I don't care. What do you do? Show details? Oh, visit the website. It's telling me, I'm trying to get on CSU, and CSU is telling me that I can't get in CSU. Man. I'm sorry, y'all. This is so aggravating. All right, here's what I'm going to do.